The door had never opened for anyone. I want to be clear about that before I tell you what happened on the morning of my 4 to 7th filter rotation. 31 expedition directors in 9 years of active survey. 11 senior xenolinguists. 4 heads of joint mission science. A rotating cast of specialists, cultural historians, AI archaeologists, decryption theorists, 2 professors who had published competing monographs on Valdres-class archive construction and argued about it loudly in the corridor while I swept around their feet. Every one of them had stood in front of the unread deck's lower vault door at some point and pressed their credentials to the reader panel. Every one had been refused. The door did not alarm, did not protest, did not explain. It simply did not open. The glyphs cut into its surface, 8 rows of them, each running the full 4-meter width of the frame, stayed dark, cold, patient. 9,000 years of that patience before we ever arrived on the Valdres. Another 9 years of it after. My job had nothing to do with the door. The vault's antechamber, the vestibule between the corridor access hatch and the sealed door itself, had an atmospheric maintenance panel set into the left wall. Humidity regulation, particulate filter, carbon cycling. The Valdres was a derelict, old enough that its internal systems had long since decoupled from any central oversight, but individual environmental cells still ran on residual power if you fed them the right maintenance inputs. Someone had decided, 8 years before I arrived on station, that the antechamber air quality should be maintained, partly for preservation of whatever was inside. Partly, I think, because it felt wrong to let a thing 9,000 years old breathe stale air. That someone was gone. I was the someone now. Every 12 days I came down through the access hatch, crossed the antechamber's 12 meters of bare stone floor. The Valdres had been built from something that looked like compressed mineral fiber, pale grey-green, smooth underfoot, and opened the maintenance panel. I pulled the particulate filter, logged its saturation reading, replaced it with a fresh one from my kit, checked the humidity seals, adjusted the carbon cycling input if the ambient reading was off, and left. The whole rotation took 22 minutes on a clean day, 30 if the panel cover was stiff. I had done it 243 times before the morning I am describing. I did not think about the vault door while I worked. This is important. The door was behind me when I faced the maintenance panel. I was aware of it the way you are aware of a wall. It was there, it had always been there, it would be there after I left. I had stopped reading the expedition reports about the door after my first year on station. The theories bored me. I was not a scholar. I was the man who changed the filters. On the morning of my 244th rotation, I came down, crossed the antechamber, opened the panel. The filter read high, 3 days early, which meant the air quality in the corridor system outside had been running dirty, probably from the eastern excavation teams tracking sediment through the access hatches. I pulled the old filter, logged it, reached into my kit for the replacement. The panel cover shifted. Not dramatically, just the upper left corner, which had been warping for 6 weeks and which I had been meaning to file a maintenance request about and had not. It canted inward at an angle that would have jammed the filter cartridge if I'd tried to seat it straight. I needed to brace the cover back while I slotted the new filter in. The panel was on the left wall. I was facing it. I reached out with my right hand behind me, not looking, and put my palm flat against whatever was there. The vault door. I felt it before I understood what I had done. The surface was cold, the way old metal is cold in a climate-controlled space, not the deep cold of vacuum, but the settled cold of something that had been the same temperature for a very long time. The glyphs were raised slightly from the surface, and I felt their edges under my palm. I was not thinking about them. I was thinking about the filter cartridge and the angle of the cover and whether I should write up the maintenance request tonight or wait until I had a fuller list of items. The door opened. Not violently. Not with a rush of air or a crack of ancient seals breaking. It swung inward on a geometry I could not entirely follow. The hinge points were not where I would have expected, and as it moved, the glyphs lit. All of them. Not sequentially, not in some cascading wave of revelation. All at once. 8 rows, full width, warm gold light cutting through the antechamber's cool ambient glow, and the light did not flicker or pulse. It simply was, steady and full, as if it had been waiting with its hand on the switch for 9,000 years and had simply been waiting for someone to give it a reason. I stood there with the filter cartridge in my left hand and my right still raised where the door had been. I did not go in immediately. I am not sure why. It did not feel like fear. It felt like the same instinct that makes you pause in the doorway of a room where someone is sleeping. a recognition that the space had been undisturbed for a very long time and that entering it without acknowledgement would be a kind of rudeness. I stood in the antechamber and looked through the open vault door and let my eyes adjust. The chamber beyond was not large. I had imagined, from the expedition reports and the theoretical reconstructions, something cathedral-sized, a vast repository, rows of data cores stretching into shadow, the weight of a dead civilization's entire record pressing down from a ceiling. It was not that. It was perhaps 15 meters across, circular, with a ceiling that curved to a shallow dome 8 meters above the floor. The walls were lined with recessed panels, dozens of them, maybe 100, each one a dark translucent material that I later learned was a storage medium specific to the civilization that had built the Valdris. In the center of the room, on a plinth of the same pale grey-green compressed mineral, sat the core, the Valdris hoard. 9,000 years of a dead people's complete record. It was the size of a large desk, roughly ovoid. The surface was the same dark translucent material as the wall panels, but where they were flat and recessed, the core's surface was carved, intricate, fine work, lines running in patterns I could not resolve into meaning from the doorway. It was lit from within. Not brightly. A deep, settled amber glow, like coals that have been banked very carefully and have been burning at exactly this temperature for longer than human civilization has existed. I crossed the antechamber and stepped through the door. The light in the room shifted when I entered. Not a dramatic response. No surge. No sudden brightening. A settling, the way a room feels when the last person who was supposed to be there has finally arrived. I walked to the center. I stopped in front of the plinth. The core's amber glow was warm on my face. Behind me, from somewhere above, I learned later that Dr. Vettys Carl and her research assistant had been in the corridor above the access hatch when the antechamber lit up, and had come down. I heard footsteps on the access ladder, then the hatch, then the soft sound of 2 people stopping in the antechamber doorway and not coming further. I did not look back. The core spoke. I do not know how to explain the mechanics of it. There was no speaker grill I could see, no obvious audio output. The sound seemed to come from the carved surface itself, or from the air immediately around it, or perhaps from some mechanism of the room I have no framework to describe. It was not loud. It was 4 words, spoken in no language I had ever heard, and I understood every syllable of it as clearly as if it had been spoken in my birth language, which it had not been. You tended well. That was all. 4 words. The amber glow did not change. The carved lines on the core surface did not shift or rearrange. No holographic projection rose from the plinth. No door opened to an inner chamber. Nothing else happened, except that the room continued to be exactly as it had been, full of light, warm, settled, patient, and I stood in front of the thing that had waited 9,000 years to say those 3 words to someone. I sat down on the floor. I do not know exactly why. My knees did not give out. I was not overwhelmed in any way I would call dramatic. It was more that standing seemed like the wrong posture for what had just been said. I sat cross-legged on the pale grey-green stone in front of the plinth, with the filter cartridge still in my left hand, and I stayed there. Dr. Carl's assistant filed his report within the hour. Dr. Carl herself sent a priority transmission to the Joint Mission Oversight Board before she came fully down the access ladder. By early afternoon, the expedition director and 3 senior scholars had made their way to the antechamber doorway and stood there in a line, looking in at me and at the open vault and at the lit core, and none of them came inside. I do not know if they were waiting for permission. I had not given any, and I did not give any. I was not the authority on what happened in that room. I was just the man who had been there first. The core did not speak again that day. It has not been silent either, exactly. The scholars who have since entered and worked in the vault describe a quality to the room's atmosphere that they struggle to put into technical language, something like attentiveness, like the sensation of being carefully listened to. I cannot help them describe it better than that. I have no academic vocabulary for what the Valdris hoard is or what it is doing when it is not speaking. What I know is this: the filter panel on the antechamber's left wall still needs its cartridge replaced every 12 days. The upper left corner of the cover still warps inward. I filed the maintenance request 2 weeks after everything happened, and the parts have not yet arrived, so I still brace the cover with my free hand when I seat the new filter. The work takes 22 minutes on a clean day. On the morning after the vault opened, I came back to do the rotation. I crossed the antechamber. I opened the panel. I replaced the filter. I logged the reading, checked the humidity seals, adjusted the carbon cycling input by a quarter point because the ambient was running 2 ticks low. The vault door stood open the whole time I worked. I did not go inside that morning. My rotation did not take me inside. When I was done, I closed the maintenance panel, picked up my kit, and went back up through the access hatch. The Joint Mission's official record lists me as the individual who achieved first successful entry into the Valdres Lower Vault Complex after 9,000 years of non-access. My name is in the academic papers that have been filed since, though I have not read them. I am told my role is described, in the formal language of the discipline, as incidental, an unintentional contact event, a custodial worker whose routine maintenance activities resulted in inadvertent activation of the vault's entry protocols. I do not argue with any of that. I know what the archive said. I know why it said it. It did not want a scholar. It did not want someone with credentials or a theory or a career built on understanding what was inside it. It waited 9,000 years, through the fall of the civilization that made it and the long silence after and the 9 years of us pressing our access cards to its reader, and what it had been waiting for, the thing it recognized when it finally came, was someone who showed up every 12 days without wanting anything from it, and kept the air clean, and went away. That is apparently worth saying something about, if you are patient enough. I have found, since then, that I agree.